all had time to sit and digest Penn State football's 20-12 loss to Ohio State, but I don't know that it makes it anything other than indigestion for Penn State football fans here on Monday morning. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Sean Fitz and Nate Bauer out in Columbus to talk about to see the game. We're going to be talking about that today. And kind of like church, I'm going to try and set up something in the middle here for questions and prayers and concerns for Penn State football fans in the middle and end of the show. So we want your questions, we want your feedback, your reactions to the show today, but we are going to be breaking things down, talking about what happened, and I have a feeling we're going to be spending a good bit of time on the Penn State offense and what happened on Saturday. Let's get an off-the-top implications of the loss to Ohio State. Fitz, I'm going to come to you. Actually, Nate, I'm going to come to you because Fitz is tweeting out the promo. So, Nate, I'm going to come to you. Implications of this loss and where the season goes. You are the glass half full guy after the game. Do you still feel that way?
I don't know about half full. I think here's the word that comes to mind instantly and all the time, and I can't get it out of my head, is purgatory, right? The Penn State football program is in the waiting room of a very nice place, right? It's like the club outside the club, and it's super great. They treat you really, really well, right? There are drinks, there's all kinds of stuff to do, but there's a velvet rope, and Ohio State is behind that other door, and so is Georgia. Right. So is Alabama. I mean, it's not a huge club, but Penn State wants to be in it. And Saturday, again, was a demonstration that Penn State is not in that club. So still room to grow and things that have to be done for Penn State as a program, as a program, but also, right, as a team just this year. There's just these very elemental things that have to happen if Penn State wants to win more games against very challenging opponents this season.
Yeah, HF Transplant is in the chat today already with the donation to the channel. He just says, as Brick Tamlin would say, loud noises! That's, I think, how Penn State fans feel this morning. Fitz, your thoughts on implications of this loss to Ohio State. What does it mean to you for the 2023 season and, what happens going forward?
The 2023 season, I mean, still depends on Michigan. Like that is how we expected it coming into the season. That doesn't change. How things go in the big picture is you can scratch and claw and make the gains that they've made on Ohio State. And I think you saw two teams that were, from a talent perspective, I think the gap was smaller than we've seen in a long time. But you can scratch and claw and make those gains and just see it all washed away in the actual football game. That's where it gets it. That's where the criticism is going to come for James Franklin, rightfully so. And that's where the criticism is going to come for this program as a second tier program. Ohio State went out there and had those guys make those plays. Penn State did not. That is going to reflect on not only the guys that you have on the field, but going back to the recruiting, going back to the staff. It's going to reflect on everybody and just show you, when you've got a chance like this, like Penn State had a chance to do it. To do it, and they just fell flat. And I think that's going to come back, and that's going to play into those stereotypes that people outside the program have for this program. And they're not. I mean, there's something to that. And what Nate is saying about purgatory, what Nate is saying about just being outside the door is, I agree, it's great, but also it's not there. And when your expectations internally, externally, wherever are there, and you can't get there, and a lot of that is on your own doing. That's what makes it tough. And it was on the verge of, I wrote my impressions after the game the other day, and there was a lot going on, and it was, critical. If you checked it out, thank you for doing that on blueillustrated.com. But I just had this thought where when you play offense, like they play offense, it just sucks the hope right out of you. If you lose that game 44-40, you're feeling okay about yourself because you did it. But when you do that on a national stage, the way that they've done that in the past, like this is not the first time it's happened, it sucks the hope out of the fan base. It sucks the hope out of anything that you wanted to build. And that's where those those gains that you make in the offseason. That's where the positive investment and all this kind of stuff that you have made strides in greatly in the last 5 years, like immense strides in those areas. That's when they fall flat. And that's the disappointing part for if you're a Penn State fan.
CB 1994 here. He says on another note, still just incredibly bummed, but fighting through it today for you guys. We're off to a hot start here on the BWI Live Show because of you guys, because of you, CB 1994, being here. Appreciate that. Appreciate everybody who showed up in the post-game show. I love that we've got people that are dedicated to coming here and listening and being a part of the conversation on the BWI Live Show. So, like I said, we're going to be doing that throughout the show. We got some things that we have to get to in terms of, like, we've got to break down the game. We'll get to your comments and your questions here in a little bit, but the first thing is we have a sponsor on the show, and that sponsor makes me look very good, and that is Bird Dogs. Wearing the Bird Dog shirt. Love it. The little logo. I always point the wrong way. Little logo here. Check it out. That's the Bird Dogs logo. If you see me basically anywhere, a little cold now for the polo, but if you see me basically anywhere, I'll be wearing Bird Dogs. Fitz, I know you've been wearing your Bird Dogs around. It's a little colder, but the joggers, they're pretty good, right? You were saying earlier you got some compliments
The joggers
on
are
how
great.
good they
I
look.
love them.
Yeah. You weren't sold on them
I love
at first,
the joggers.
right?
I'm actually wearing the shorts. Yeah, I wasn't. Well, I mean, I'm built like an ostrich, so like it's kind of different to see those kind of things on me. So like I'm wearing the shorts right now, and I wear shorts all year round. That's what I do. I work from home, so I wear shorts, and these Bird Dogs are fantastic. I'm wearing them right now. I just got my workout in this morning, and then hopped in the shower, and boom, I'm good for the day. So yeah, we appreciate Bird Dogs in every form. And I think they look good in any weather. T. Frank.
Yeah. And if you want to get your Bird Dogs, go use the promo code BWI when ordering to receive a Bird Dogs Hydro Flask style water bottle with your purchase. Again, that's www.birddogs.com/BWI. Thanks to them for being a part of the show. And of course, we'll be talking about and looking good in our Bird Dogs throughout the rest of the year. Let's get to it. The Penn State offense. Stephen Light here says, it's with sadness that I report the sinking of the USS Yersich this past Saturday. Off course in heavy fog, grounded while trying to pass. Stephen is one of our regulars. He's one of the most level-headed individuals that I have interacted with that is a fan here, both on the site and on the show. And Stephen was saying to me Saturday, he's now time to fire Yersich level. So like reasonable people, a good barometer have gone completely off board of the kind of stay down the middle with the Penn State offense. So let's get into it and review if that's right or if that's not right. Fitz, the offense. Just a mess of things we could talk about. Where does it start with you for what they tried to do on Saturday? And as you pointed out, 6 points and no hope in a big game. That's just not even bad for that game. That's bad for the season, and it's a bad look.
Two things have to compliment the Ohio State defense. Thought they were very good. Penn State all season has taken what the defense has given them in lieu of the big play, in lieu of kind of everything. They've taken what the defense has given them. What happens when the defense gives you nothing? It takes away everything. How do you pivot? Penn State didn't. That's the issue there, is there was no falling back on it and, dink and dunk and whatever you want to call it. You try to do that, and they took that away. Like they were better, prepared for this game. And they, I think if Ohio State was going to get beat over top, they adjust to it. Penn State did not have the weapons to beat them over top. So I think that's number one, is like, what do you do when they take away everything? And Ohio State is athletic enough to take away everything. No, two teams on your schedule, maybe three teams on your schedule can press to do that. Not going to necessarily say they can do it, but they're going to press to do that because they have the athletes to do it. Ohio State's one of them. Playing in Ohio Stadium is tough. Number two. Yeah. The thing all season has been make Drew Aller beat you. And I'm not sure that's really what Jim Knowles was going to do. I think he was going to meet. Yeah, we're going to get to third downs. Don't worry. I think he was more centered on making those guys on the outside beat you, because there was nothing there. I mean, these were freshman cornerback, backup cornerbacks, whatever it was. Penn State's lack of weapons was alarming to begin with. And they just weren't, they might as well not have been there. Like you took them completely out of the game. So yes, you make the first year quarterback beat you by extension of the wide receivers, but the wide receivers were just non-existent. And that's tough. The third thing, you mentioned the third downs there. I asked Caden Saunders after the game, what's the identity of this team? and the identity of this offense. Apologize for that. And he was talking about sustaining drives and, being efficient and all that kind of stuff that we've talked about for the last 6 weeks, because they've done it fairly well against inferior competition, obviously, but they've done it fairly well. Yes, when that doesn't work, what do you do? And there was no spin. There was no pulling off the pile. There was nothing that you could do to make that happen. And it wasn't a situation where they got off schedule. It wasn't a situation where they were terribly behind the sticks or anything like that. It's just they couldn't get that or continue that going, and that just took away their entire identity. And when you don't have an identity, you get what you had on Sunday, or excuse me, Saturday. You get what you had on Sunday too, which is a lot of critical depression there. But no, I think it's just tough to watch this team as they try to establish themselves as a Michigan light. And when you can't do that, you can't pivot to anything else. And I think that's the most disappointing thing. And that's on Mike Yurcich and James Franklin. I mean, there's you got to find something else, and you got to stick to your guns, man. 3rd and 1, you're a power running team. Even if you're not always a power running team and the best version of your running game, go for it. Like go for those situations where you need to man up. And if you don't get it like that, it's different when you run the ball on 3rd and 7. But if you run that ball on 3rd and 1, you've got an opportunity there. So I struggle to say that there's one answer to this because there's a lot of little misses, like the 3rd and 1 I'm talking about, running the ball tipped at the line. Keandre catches that. Maybe it's a big play. Maybe it's not. I mean, it's tough to say all these little things and these what have yous, these what ifs, if you will. But yeah, it's just to watch a team with no purpose, with no identity, to not be able to just sort of change their game to do anything whatsoever. Like that's the problem. It's not that you got to the doorstep and you couldn't get in there. It's just you couldn't do anything.
It felt like there wasn't, and this is unfair. It felt like from a running perspective there was a cohesive game plan, but I don't know that it affected the defense the way they wanted it to. And Fitz said something that I think is critically important that we were talking about after the game, talking about the identity of this team. Yeah. You need to have conviction, and you need to go against all of your tendencies. If you're James Franklin and you want to be a power-running, methodical team, you have to be convicted to do it. But you and I were having a conversation after the game and yesterday about whether or not Penn State could be the team they wanted to be, especially in short yardage. So,
T. Frank, can I stop you there for a second? You said you have to go against all your tendencies. Are they trying too hard to go in the other direction with these tendencies? I mean, that seemed like an issue that kept cropping up on 3rd and 4, on 3rd and 5, things like that. Just getting away from that, and like even like the 3rd and 7 run that I referenced earlier in the game, I didn't hate that call. Like I think that it broke a tendency and had an opportunity to be successful. It just didn't get there. But are they going too far in the other direction, getting too cute, as we would say?
I wonder whether or not they can be a short yardage team without JB Nelson. Ty Williams was a problem for them. They identified him early in the week, and then they tried to run around him with their outside zone, and Hunter Norzad failed to get him and to secure that block. So that's one part of it. Secondarily, this is where Nate and I were talking about where's the 3rd tight end? Where is the T formation? This is something that Andrew Rapplier was not available. JB Nelson was available but didn't play. Khalil Dinkins was available but didn't see the field in these short yardage situations. So I'm openly questioning whether or not those guys were healthy enough for play. And if you don't have the T formation, you don't have a 3rd tight end to put out there. This is something I broke down on T. Frank's film room. The only evidence we have that they were going to go into a heavy package was 4th and 1. And on screen, at least, they only showed it for a couple seconds, but you can see they only had 4 eligible players out there. No 3rd tight end, and they were bringing in Drew Shelton as an eligible blocker. So they had to call a timeout, and they decided to punt. That's the only evidence we have of a short yardage package in that game. They ran out of the shotgun the entire time. This is a quarterback sneak T formation team that didn't do any of that. So Nate, and I guess it's the things that we didn't see, the shots that we didn't see called, the formations that we didn't see. Like, was Penn? I guess I'm openly questioning, and I don't have an answer. I don't know that you do, but if you don't have that, how do you pivot in the middle of the week and make something out of nothing if you don't have any tight ends?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know how you pivot. The thing that keeps coming up to me really, as I kind of digest and work through this game, is not necessarily the game itself as much as the wasted time leading into it, right? All of the defenses that Penn State faced, right? And I don't want to get into the chuck it deep conversation, right? It's not about that. It is, you were playing inferior competition in every way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Iowa, right? Like, to me, Iowa represented maybe the best version of what this Penn State offense can look like against that a defense of that caliber.
Yeah.
And it wasn't good.
It wasn't even close. Wasn't even close.
Right? Like, it wasn't that was not that offense, and what they had was not good. And so there was just this, what feels to me as though, yes, they leaned in on the things that they were good at, but also didn't get better at the things that they weren't good at. And that's like, that to me is where it becomes problematic, is then you do get into that situation where, okay, you're missing some personnel. Like, this happens, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and you cannot use just JB Nelson and Khalil Dinkins as, okay, they lost the game because those guys weren't available. No, they lost the game because Drew Aller was not accurate. The offensive line allowed pressure all afternoon. I mean, you just, like, it's the play calling itself.
Right. But you come into the game. This is the part, I guess, that this is why I'm emphasizing this. We talked about JB Nelson on the Thursday show and said, this is a guy who's got NFL power, explosiveness. He isn't perfect. He's not going to finish every block, but he has the strength and the some things that maybe Vega, who is more of a grinding type of guy, he doesn't have the explosiveness of a JB Nelson, which might help you in some situations against that nose tackle, against Ty Williams, I think is his name. So, like, if you're James Franklin and going in, you don't have that, you're going to design a game plan trying to get around the fact that your left guard is a redshirt freshman. And Fitz, I guess this is what I saw in the game, is like, Vega made some mental mistakes, which we've seen him make during the year. He wasn't terrible, but he obviously was not good, and that combination on the interior was a lot of what they were getting early in the year of JB Nelson and Hunter Norzad. And I guess this comes back to, I want to say I'm kind of obsessing about this, but JB Nelson performative availability on Wednesday, is that what that was? Was there something that happened later in the week? I think this is something we need to follow up on, because I think it tectonically changes what we're talking about here with the offensive identity, what they want to do in that situation, and what they could do. So I guess, is that too much of an emphasis from me, or is there something else that is at play here?
I think the emphasis is, if he's in there, I'm not going to say it's a different game, but it's a different look. Like, like that interior offensive line got crushed. Like, there was no going back and saying, well, they weren't as bad as you think they were. I think they were pretty bad this weekend. So like that's number one. I think it changes the way that you call some things, maybe especially in short yardage. Vega I think he's a good prospect, but again, we talk about the difference between playing good as a freshman and playing well. So he's not there yet. And I think that showed, and that's kind of had a ripple effect. I don't know Norzad looked like a guy, especially with the snaps, like throwing, like we talked about high snaps earlier this year. We got laces snaps this week. That screams to me that he is doing the work of two people, like trying to get two people in the right spot. And that's a problem. Like, you cannot have that. So whether it's communication, whether it's, overemphasizing one thing to help out another guy, I don't know. Norzad got, once he did make that snap, got beat pretty handily this weekend. So I think that's where you start with there. But yeah, that's going to change your identity. I don't know that it's simple. I mean, you looked at coming into the game, Ohio State, clearly the more banged up team, the more those are the guys that had to adjust more for what they didn't have. And maybe they were more prepared for that. Maybe Nelson was the thing that was leading up, getting, game time decision, if you will, was not on the injury report, which those things are becoming it's a different conversation. Yes.
Yeah. That's part of the conversation this week as well, right?
A lot of that's rooted in Bijan Robinson yesterday, but that's a whole nother topic. No, I mean, it's very different when you're calling the game with a redshirt freshman that's it doesn't give you the same ability to finish especially in the pass game. Like, I think Vega is capable as a run blocker. I don't know that he's going to get where he needs to be as a redshirt freshman to combo and get off into the second level. And they really struggled with that, of course, this week, because you're playing a different breed of athlete. But I think that's going to change the way that you look at it. But I don't think does it change it that much. I'm not an offensive coordinator. I'm not a head football coach. But that's the question I have.
It just felt like the vibe of the offense lost its confidence in the run game. It lost its conviction in that, and that's to me like that's the game plan is what we saw. And going back to this, when we look at how the running backs were used, 9 touches each in the ground game for both Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton, and very few in the second half. So that's a part of just trying to understand what Penn State was trying to do in this game from a perspective of what they were versus what they did on Saturday. Nate, I want to get to your thought in just 1 second because we've got a bunch of this stuff piling up here. It's like the postgame show just started up again. Kalen King cost himself big money on Saturday. Not a first-round talent, says Dave Demkowski. And Olu reminds me of Donovan Smith, game better suited for the NFL than the Big Ten.
Whoa.
Yeah. Let's have a conversation about that, guys. 4 pressures in the game was, I think, a high in his career, but that is not a bad game. That's just his worst game. That's a guy who was put into a situation to fail quite a bit and didn't fail all that much because of the game flow from what happened on Saturday. You were going to say, Nate.
T. Frank, what did we talk about on Thursday? The dynamic of the game, how the game would unfold.
Yep.
Penn State playing from behind.
Yep.
Realistically, they are not built to do that. They have played with a lead for the entirety of the season, absent the first half against Northwestern, right? Which I'm not sure we could honestly say was in question. And so we talk about the identity of this team, right? You want to talk about the identity of the offense? It's as front running. it's being ahead and controlling the game. That is who they are. And when you look at what you just talked about with the carries to Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen, the game had shifted at that point. Even like a 7-point, I made a joke to Fitz during the game that Penn State needing 3 field goals with 7 minutes to play, right? Like they didn't have enough time to score 3 field goals in that time, because that's what it became is that offensively, they lost the ability to dictate terms because they at no point were they in control of that game, absent the fumble return for a touchdown, right? That didn't happen. If that play happens, maybe the dynamic of the game shifts a little bit and you can do some more things. You have more flexibility, but instead it just felt to me as though offensively they just panicked, I think, a little bit in terms of how they tried to attack it in the second half. 2
receiver passes in one game and a double reverse pass does feel a little panicky, Fitz. Like
that was over the 2.5 from the over under, by the way, on Thursday's show. So
you called that, right?
I hit that one.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, it's desperate. It's desperate, and being desperate down 1 score, like that one stinks, man. That one is not where you want to be. And I think that I know people are jumping on Nate here for yes, it was a 1-score game. It felt like
it wasn't
holding that hand out there and someone swinging underneath of you, and you can hit a body blow, great, but Penn State was not landing anything. Like that's really where you felt about it. So yes, I think you're both right.
Speaking of calling it, we have our shot caller moment of the week, brought to you by Nate Bauer.
The shot call moment of the week.
I've seen enough at this point of Penn State's offense to think it is not as good as last year's offense, right? Like this is an offense that is not as well developed. The running backs, however you want to frame it, right? I get the patient approach. I get all of that stuff. Something is not quite the same for Nick Singleton this year as it was last year. Kaytron Allen's doing what Kaytron Allen does, but the numbers just aren't as gaudy, and I'm not sure exactly why. Drew Aller, right, is very mature and has done a lot of really good things this year. It's still not at the level, I don't feel like, as an offense in terms of its cohesiveness and its synchronicity, if you want, as last year's, right, by the end of last season. So
Mr. Nate Bauer called it. I was thinking that the offense and Drew Aller in this situation, when they had to have it, they would be able to deliver more. There'd be more clutch throws. Drew Aller could elevate the offense when he had to because he hadn't been asked to. You were right. Like, there's no evidence of that, and they absolutely did not have that from the quarterback, who was under siege, but also did not play well once again on the road. Like, he was off from the very first third down pass. So, Nate, congratulations on seeing that and calling it out early. Well done, sir.
I take no pleasure. There's no... I understand the pain of the Penn State fans right now, but there were signs of this. There have been signs of this all year. I mean, really, even going back to August, right? And that's, I think, what is the difficult conversation to have right now is the receivers have been in it. Like, this has been known. Okay. Yeah. Like, nothing has changed. And not only were they a vulnerable position to begin with, but it was made worse by the fact that two of arguably their top four have been missing either altogether or kind of for most of the year, right? In Trey Wallace and Omari Evans.
Fitz, if Dante Cephas enrolls in January, does this change? Like, are the domino effects, and Nate talking about this from, all the way back, we've known this for a long time. Does that change stuff in this game? Because we said, give him time to develop. It's now 2 months into his development at Penn State. It's still not what it would be if he was here in January. So, like, do these domino effects of, that wasn't good in January, did we see that on the field on Saturday, or is that too simple that they should have pass catchers that can get open against Big Ten competition?
Yeah, I don't think it changes that much. I mean, you give him a chance to learn the playbook a little bit more, and I think that's been a struggle for specifically Cephas in terms of like learning the routes and turning that into playing fast. Like that is the issue with all those wideouts. Really, is like you either get the route right or you get it fast. There's not one or the other, and I think that's the big thing. And you look at what's across the board or across the line of scrimmage, those guys do it right and they play fast. And that's the difference. And then they make ridiculous play. I mean, I know he's not a receiver, but Cade Stover's catch over Kobe King was sort of, that was the game, like right there. That was the, that is the summation of that entire game. Is it just being out of reach of Penn State and Ohio State going up and making the extra play? And Penn State didn't have that, whether it's Cephas, Liam Clifford, any of those. I mean, even creeping up into Wallace and Lambert Smith. I mean, you just never felt threatened by those guys on the outside, no matter which number was out there.
So we're going to get to, we're here at the halfway point of the show. I do want to address the chat because there's a lot of people that have a lot of opinions there. First thing is myperfectfranchise.net. If you want to take control of your life, you cannot control Penn State football. You cannot control how they perform in these big moments, but you can control the next step in your life. Maybe you're a displaced corporate executive. Maybe you are somebody with management skills that wants to get out of your situation and dictate the next chapter. My Perfect Franchise, Andy Ludicky, is a franchise consultant that can help you find the right business for you to manage and reap the benefits of being whatever type of owner you want to be. Hands-on, hands-off, part-time, full-time. Contact Andy, 404-973-9901, to go through his franchise consultation, which is 100% free, and he helps you find your best fit, your skills applied to the next thing in your life, whether you want to diversify your assets, leave a legacy, or, like I've been saying, the American dream is when you have freedom, and freedom comes with the ability to dictate your life. Well, that can be if you have financial freedom. So once again, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net, 404-973-9901. We'll be talking about Andy for a long time now here on the show. Longtime sponsor of the BWI Live Show. He's a huge recruiting nut. We're going to get to some of the questions about recruiting here in a little bit. But we do have to get to the prayers and concerns in the chat because there's a long conversation going on here. And, of course, I need to get back to where I was trying to start. KJ Johnson says, the program feels like where Georgia was under Mark Richt. Very good, but not elite. Fair comparison, guys? Fitz, what do you think?
I think there's parallels. I mean, it's a different game than when Mark Richt was doing it at Georgia. But, I think that there's parallels in there. I don't know. I don't know enough about where Georgia was at that point in terms of, like, where did Mark Richt finish? I don't know, but I think there's parallels into just being outside of the national conversation. Georgia, I think, was in a better spot to propel themselves from a location standpoint, from a recruiting potential standpoint, than Penn State.
David is back. He says PSU media needs to ask James Franklin sharp questions tomorrow. No softballs. Your audience wants answers, not coach speak. You can ask any question you want, Nate, and he'll give you coach speak if he wants to give you coach speak. And that's part of the conversation with the questions asked are to maximize the answer you get from James Franklin. It's a game, and it is on his terms. If that is that a fair way to assess the way we approach James Franklin to try and get answers and information?
To me, there is a pathway to honesty from him. First of all, he's more often honest than he is not. Sometimes he's shorter than you would like, and sometimes he elaborates too much on nothing, right? It's filler. But my point only is if you come in with not a perspective, not a, hey, like, did you do this because of this? I've already decided that you're wrong and you need to atone for your sins. Right. You'll get an answer. You'll get something. And I mean, T. Frank, you and I talked about this yesterday. How do you get him to acknowledge and or discuss the middle of the field and Drew Aller, right? How do you get him to talk about, right? After the game, what he said was, and you can connect all the dots here, right? Like this isn't crazy town, okay? He talked about putting his quarterback in the best position all season, and they felt like they had done that, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does putting your quarterback in the best position to succeed mean against the competition that they had played previously and against what it is in these two games against Ohio State and Michigan? And how does that look? What to what extent do you have to take him out of those circumstances, because those circumstances are exactly what those opponents know you like to do and can defend it, unlike some of the opponents that Penn State has played previously.
Yeah, it was a pretty simple formula, as Fitz said. Like, they took away the things that they like to do, and this was an open question against Northwestern. So if they take away those easy access cover 3, cover 4 throws, and you don't get to eat on 6-7 free yards, how do you adapt and evolve? And I don't want to put, like at my T. Frank's film room, I'm going to have 3 of them this week. So we're going to get into all of this. So I'll reserve most of my opinion, but this is, I can't help it here a little bit. This is the biggest problem to me is the middle of the field. This is 10 yards or deeper down the middle of the field between the hashes. Aller has attempted 11% of his passes in that area. If you want to even compare him to Sean Clifford, we're talking about 17.5%. But the other Big Ten quarterbacks that matter, Kyle McCord and J.J. McCarthy, they are in the 20s. So double or more of what Drew Aller is doing over the middle of the football field. So, like, how do you win if you don't use the entire field? And this is kind of my problem with, if he's an elite quarterback and he's an elite processor, you can't just take away parts of the field because you're afraid he's going to throw the ball to the other team. You need to let him develop as a quarterback to read the field and throw and have routes and options over the middle of the field. So, like, as much as I have been giving them the narrative of doing the hard things well and sustaining drives, etc., if your quarterback is not using the full field, he's not developing into the guy that can be a next level processor. And, I'll get to a question here. That's just my opinion on the situation, having seen it again in full naked view without some of the advantages they've had. Patrick Kuhn says, I'm as angry as any and frustrated as the next person, and there's plenty of blame, but remember, this is a college sport. These kids have a stable program, one last team. It's a one-loss team with room to grow. I guess that's the question. Do they have room to grow, Fitz? Do you think that this team can adapt and evolve in their shortcomings?
I think there's room to grow. Whether that growing gets you an extra win this year, I don't know. Like, they're sitting where they're at perpetually 10-2, for a reason. So I think there is room to grow, and there's small growth there, but I don't think it's like get you over the top growth right now, at least for this season.
I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just very quickly, like I think that there's a question of that we don't have an answer to, right? Of play calling and asking Drew to do things that maybe he believes himself capable of doing versus what is he not capable of doing right now?
Mm-hmm.
What has the coaching staff seen that says to them, hey, it's not a good idea to put him in these situations? Right. It's not a good idea to do this, and this. And we don't really know. I don't feel the answer to that. The counter narrative, like the counterpoint to make to that is, if he went 15 practices in preseason without throwing an interception, what were they doing? Right? Like what?
Yeah.
What were they? What was the offense? What did it look? Has it? Right. That's the unknown. Is, has it always been this? That throughout the preseason, throughout camp, throughout the first 6 games of the season. I mean, T. Frank, you did such a great job with that film review yesterday. Is it all out patterns? Like, is that it? Is that it? Right? Is that the whole thing? Is they're saying to themselves, look, we've got a first year quarterback. James Franklin talked about it at Big Ten Media Days, right? If I was an opponent, I would make that first year quarterback beat me and not let the running backs beat me. Okay, so this internally, the mindset has been, okay, we know that that's the approach that they're going to do, and we're not going to let Drew Aller beat us either.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're going to say, hey, you keep the ball safe.
That's Fitz. Going back to what you said of a 6-point performance, and like, if that's the context of the conversation, like, that's also super depressing. 5-star quarterback, and Dave is on a rampage in the chat talking about the passing game, the 5-star quarterback. Like, is it this non-development of a quarterback? Is that a part of the conversation? Like, is that fair?
I mean, I don't know that we're ready to have that conversation yet, but like, I am curious about the usage in terms of like, what are you protecting him from? Is the interception the end of the season? Like that is how they have coached this, is how they've schemed it, is like, if he throws an interception, everyone's done. Penn State didn't turn the ball over on offense on Saturday, and it did not matter. Like, it did not matter. They did enough on offense that equated to turnovers. Like that is over 15 on your first 15 third downs, etc. That sort of thing eventually does not matter. And I think that's really where you get to it. And are you going to, I know people want to jump on the bus train and everything like that, but like, you see the talent, you see that he can make some throws. You got to get his feet underneath of him. You got to get him to, be confident in those throws. But like, when you're playing with one quarter of the field on one side, one quarter on the field on the other side, and you've got arguably, your most talented pass catchers in the middle of the field, what are we doing here?
Yeah, and that's going back to the tight ends, 12 personnel. If you can't use the middle of the field. So Ohio State doesn't have extra players on the field. They were taking away the outside and giving Penn State the middle of the field. There were times where the linebackers are shaded outside the tackle, and you've got safeties 10 yards deep, and there's no threat over the middle of the field. Larry says Penn State played out of character, run-heavy team. Wanted to make sure we got to his stuff here in the chat as well. One last thing, and then we'll get on to some of the other things we can talk about with the Penn State offense and the defense. Stephen Light says the Boston media is composed 100% of mass holes. If the coach does not want to give an answer, you won't get one. Plus, no question for you. So comparing James Franklin to Bill Belichick is a little. I think that's a little bit. That's more than unfair to James Franklin. He'll give you an answer. It's just, if you, as Nate said, if you profess an opinion in your question, it's not going to go well for you. The Penn State defense. What's the fair conversation to have about how they played in this game, allowing 20 points in the game, but really 12 through the first quarter, 3 quarters and a half? Nate, what do you think about that performance?
Yeah, I thought they were great, not spectacular, right? I mean, look, the fumble return changes the game in a lot of ways, right? And that's the play that they kind of were missing throughout, at least on the defensive side of the ball, right? They held Ohio State. I thought that the red zone stand that they did, right, keeping Ohio State out of the end zone. I mean, there were so much good stuff that defense did. And if you hold them to 20 points, 13, right, for most of the third quarter or fourth quarter, and then they score that last touchdown on a very, very short field because of your fourth down attempt that goes wrong, right? Like that's an excellent defensive performance. It's always like comparative, right? Did anyone do or get to the spectacular that Ohio State did to Penn State last year? No, right? That didn't happen. And with the offense being as dysfunctional as it was for Penn State, that ended up being what they needed. But certainly, I mean, there is nobody on the defensive side of the ball that's going to say to themselves that they didn't do enough, that there was, right? I mean, maybe there's like a sliver that you can get to, but for the most part, that was an excellent performance. And even Marvin Harrison, right, did what he did, but he did it in the way that you want him to do it. You want it to take 11 catches, right? And again, I mean, the last one was the backbreaker, that touchdown, but you want it to take him 11 catches to go for 115 yards, whatever the final number was for him. But you want it to be that type of game for him, and they made it that. But it still, obviously was they needed something to happen defensively to put points on the board, just given how bad Penn State's offense was.
Yeah, you have to score on defense if the offense isn't going to bail you, it isn't going to be a part of the game plan. So Fitz, I guess going off of the Marvin Harrison conversation, how do you assess how Kalen King did in that matchup?
Not great. And a lot of that is switching off and sending him. And Ohio State's use of crossers, it left, I've been calling for that on Penn State side for the entire season. They do it very well, and they do it with their best players. Like they do it with Marvin Harrison coming all the way across the formation, and he is everything that we thought he was, and maybe better. Like I would argue they underutilized him at times, like because he is that good. Like he was phenomenal. So, but yeah, again, Kalen, those times that he was in there, and pass interference, and the dude still catches the ball. Like sometimes you just got to tip your hat and go the other way. But yeah, definitely cost himself in terms of what we've talked about. We've talked about that at times during the season. Is like nobody's throwing at him, but when they do, it's a lot closer than when they were throwing at Joey Porter. So he's definitely got to pick that up for the second half of the season. Cost him probably a round in the draft. I think Marvin Harrison is going to do that to a lot of people, but like when you have that marquee matchup, and when you talk about that marquee matchup all week long, and it's as decisive as I think we saw on Saturday, then that's not good for Kalen.
It was the performance that kind of defined the game in a lot of ways, because it also made Penn State have to adjust. They couldn't play man coverage at a certain point. One thing that I found interesting, and I think you made a great point there, of your pass interfered and you still make the catch. In that game, if you look at the way Ohio State played Penn State's receivers, it was a physical game. They were grabby. Everyone was holding. It was college football. The difference is Marvin Harrison Jr. made you throw the flag. His ability to get to the catch point and be there to make the defensive grabbiness obvious was a huge part of the defensive performance, because then they had to go to more zone. They couldn't do man-to-man, and then you saw some of the results of that. Nate, you mentioned the defense playing well. How do you this is a question you're not going to be able to answer, but like, how do you think that affects the locker room when you have one side putting up a winning performance and then just a ghost performance from the offense? Like, are they going to be able to rally and play Indiana this week with the same mental focus that they did a week ago?
Well, so those feel like two different questions, because the first one is acknowledging human nature, and yeah, they're going to be not happy, right? I mean, there's no one on the defensive side of the ball that's going to say to themselves, "We didn't do enough." No, it's, "Hey, man, the offense crushed us today," right? I mean, and certainly they're not going to talk about it that way to each other between the sides of the ball, but on the defensive side of the ball, they're having that conversation. And I think you bring up an excellent point for Indiana, which is Penn State has to win this game, right? Like this is, if we're talking narratives, right? I mean, everything is a 10-year window right now for James Franklin, right? We're talking about indictments on his tenure, so on and so forth. This is the one that comes back into immediate focus for me, which is they lose games the following game after the first loss of the season. Happens too many times for Penn State over that time against lesser opponents, right? So like that is real. Of all of the criticisms for James Franklin, that is absolutely real and needs to be addressed, because losing this game, not having what you need to do. And I don't think there's really anything to worry about in terms of what Indiana is going to do to Penn State, right? Like that's established. Indiana's not a great team this season, but what Penn State does to itself could be problematic in this game. And so they if for the rest of the season, if all the other stuff that they want to still be in play by the time they get to Michigan and beyond, they got to take care of business the next 2 weeks, bar none, right?
Yeah. So I guess that's the question, Fitz. Is all lost or is all not lost after this loss to Ohio State and the way that it went down?
All is not lost in terms of like double-digit win season, New Year's Six Bowl, whatever. I mean, that's kind of the purgatory that Nate brought up earlier. All is lost with championship aspirations, I think. Like, I don't think this team's going to beat Michigan. I don't think Ohio State's going to beat Michigan either. Like, Michigan's on a tear, and granted, they haven't played anybody, but they are just abusing teams left and right. Yeah, I think that's going to be tough to get out of this situation that they're in right now. Like, that is 10, 11 wins good enough? No, it's not, with the championship aspirations, all that kind of stuff. So like big picture stuff, like, or short-sighted, no, not all is lost. Big picture stuff, it's just like, how many times are we going to do this?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. By the way, I apologize for whatever is going on with my camera and audio. It seems to me that I am the full 3 seconds behind based on the way everyone's answering my questions. So I appreciate everybody, including the guys here on the show, working with this. So I guess is there more to talk about with the Penn State defense? Nate, do you have more to say there? Because we kind of, once again, we glossed over a great performance. We didn't really dig into some of those things. We can talk about Daquan Hardy. We can talk about the other things. What's some of the stuff you can pull positively from how Penn State played on that side of the ball?
I mean, this isn't a positive. It's right. This is the time for negative reactions and overreactions. But
yeah,
the pass rush didn't get home a lot, honestly. Right. I mean, they finished that game with 1 sack in the stat book, which I think was Johnny Dixon's. So you know, there is room for improvement. No turnovers. Didn't force an interception. And obviously, again, I mean, I just keep going back to that play. It's not why they lost the game. I'm not in any right. And the holding call was the right call. I mean, but it just proved to be such a critical moment for what Penn State was doing and how the game would transpire from there.
How much did, and this is Stephen Keel asked this, Hardy missing that punt, that's big. Fitz, how much did that change the game when Penn State presumably was going to have great field position? Do you think that the offense, given what we saw, that would have changed anything from how the game flow went? Or was that actually a huge missed opportunity?
I mean, it's a missed opportunity. I don't think it's going to change the game because your offense still has to go out there. But and he was asked about it after the game. He said the wind blew it across his body. He would have had to catch it over his head or something of that nature, and he just decided to let it go, which was, in hindsight, the worst decision he could have made, because that was another 25 yards. And, you were in a situation where you were winning that aspect of the field position game. So, yes, I mean, it was a big play. Does it change things? I don't know. The offense still has to come back out there and score, and that's not really what they were into on Saturday. So it's one of those tough ones. And, we talked all week about making the extra play, and really, what plays did they make, in general, to get to the extra play? There were a series of these things that happened that really was not typical of what we've seen from this team to begin with. And it played like a team that was a bit timid on the road, a bit scared on the road, and that's kind of leaked into a couple of different facets of the game. I thought the special teams was actually fine. Alex Velkins hit the kicks that he was supposed to hit. Riley Thompson probably played his best game. I don't know if it was his best average game, but he was what they wanted him to be. And unfortunately, it just kind of is all a lot. And here's the problem I have with that is it sounds like a Iowa post-game podcast, if we're taking solace in how the punter played and how the kickers played, that tells you you're not in a great spot right now.
Yeah. You're not talking about the quarterback. You're not talking about the defense. You're not talking about Kellen King. It's Riley Thompson. Good job, man.
Can I make one thing on behalf of the defense that is to their credit, or I'm not exactly sure how to phrase it, but people want blood on the fourth down decision, right? The 4th and 5 that Franklin went for with 7 minutes to play. Here, like, I'll give it to them. I think that was the wrong call. And here's why it was the wrong call. Not just because they didn't get it, and not just because the offense wasn't doing anything at that point. It's that you took the opportunity to win the game away from the one side of the football that was doing anything, right? I mean, that to me, that is the failure in that decision is the and again, I understand some of the context of that game. Ohio State's prior 2 possessions were 3.5 minutes and 4.5 minutes. They had gone 8 and 9 plays on those possessions. So the notion that the defense was wearing down, I think is accurate. But at the same time, it just felt to me like a loss, not a loss of faith, but you're just taking the opportunity away from the guys who kind of got you there, right? The guys who kept you in position to be in that game in the first place. They really didn't have the opportunity to win the game based on being put in that hole on that 4th down.
You make a good point of talking about you want to be complimentary football team, and the whole vibe of the offense is don't you dare lose this for the defense, and then you don't give the defense a chance to be the hero at the end of the game. You put them in a bad situation. Fitz, this is something that came up a lot. I'm going to ask you this question. James Franklin's asked this question after the game. I think it's a part of the conversation, and we have to address it, at least even if we don't think that it's a viable conversation. Beau Pribula, whether in a package or to give you a spark off the bench. People want to know, would that have changed the game for Penn State having a running threat at quarterback?
I don't think he does enough in the passing. Like, it's either one or the other, really. You know, you either have the running threat or you have the passing threat. I don't think there's much of it in between, because from what we've seen from Beau, while he has completed a few passes, like it hasn't been there. I mean, he's just the lack of a running threat in Franklin-led offense from a quarterback is just like, you haven't seen it. You haven't seen that work. You haven't seen that work, you know, a couple of times now with all the way back to Hackenberg and then here with Drew. So I don't know, man. Like, you can second guess a lot of things about this game. I didn't come away second guessing the Pribula thing as one of the top 5 things about this game, I would say.
So we're getting here to the end of the show. If you guys have any more questions or comments, throw them in the chat. I have run out of things that I feel like are meaningful to talk about. We could go back and talk about the offense for another 20 minutes, but we've also beaten that poor horse to death. Steven here in the chat says, just to clarify, my point is that Penn State media is not going to get anything out of being aggressive. It doesn't work anywhere. Okay, I get what you're saying. Thank you very much for the clarification, Steven. Yeah, having a question, having a feel to your question that is non-neutral, I think is a very fair point. Do you guys have any final thoughts here? We're getting final thoughts on the game and what is at stake for Penn State. One thing I did want to ask you, Fitz, actually, throw this in here, is we talk about the implications of the loss for the rest of the season, but playing poorly, having your 5-star quarterback look like, you know, in a big game, what does this do for recruiting? I know that it's kind of nebulaic, but this can't be good, right?
No, it's not good. I mean, it's not a dagger. Like, it's not going to be something that completely wipes you off the face of the earth from the recruiting side. I mean, you got to go back and spin this as to, you know, what this player can do to get you over the hump versus Ohio State. And truth be told, that's been the sell the entire time. Like, it's, you know, Michigan's won the last 2 Big Ten titles, but like Ohio State has always been the goal in terms of like what you do as a program. So I don't think it's a big dagger. One game is never going to get you an 8-point, you know, we're going to look back on this in a few months, and an 8-point loss on the road to a number 3 team or whatever Ohio State is going to go into the record book as such. So like, you're going to be able to spin your way out of that. So I don't think it's a dagger. The question is, you know, the offensive playmakers, where are they going to come from? Like, where are they going to, like, what are you going to do? Like, Ohio State is not recruiting top line wide receivers by accident. Like, there is a reason that they have put together this assembly line of playmakers on the outside. And it's because the substance came before the eventual conquest there in the recruiting. So Penn State's going to have to figure out a way to get there. You look at the past couple of, I mean, you look at recruiting since Gaddis left, and Gaddis kind of, the last 2 years he was here, like there was not much there. And Penn State has developed a couple of guys. Of course, Dotson came out and, you know, outperformed Shorter, George, all those guys. So, and they've had guys that have come along and done a nice job, Parker Washington as well. But just, you know, how do you get to that level? I don't know.
Derek asked this question in the chat. Where is Amari Evans? There's a lot of Brick Tamlin from Anchorman here in the chat. Because did he kill a guy? What's the?
I don't believe so.
I would be surprised. That would be very shocking. We would have led the show with that. I guess the hype around Amari Evans came from he had a final good week in the blue-white game, spring football. Is that enough to say, like, the hype around him has fallen, or was it false hype to begin with? Like, I guess, I don't know. I never really fully bought into Amari Evans is the guy outside, but I know that it was part of the conversation because the coaching staff made it a part of the conversation. Where do you gauge Amari Evans on where he should be and where he is, which is not a part of the offense at this point? Fitz, I wanted to ask you that.
I'm sorry. I thought you were turning in.
I'm having the worst game. I am having the Ohio State Penn State game on Monday. Jeez.
Yeah, how about it?
I don't know where he is, right? Like that's the big part of it is where is he? He's not part of anything. He's just not. I mean, we see him in practice, but he at no point has he been like, oh, hey, now he's back in the mix. He's the second guy at X, or right. I mean, it's just that has not really happened. And so obviously the conversation earlier this season was bumps and bruises, but I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but I will say something that I think is relevant is even after that, right? So there were 2 points of the conversation. One was Amari Evans has changed the dynamic of what Dante Cephas means to the receiver group. That was an important conversation to have. But the second part of the conversation was in late June, July, whenever we met with them. But we're still debating whether or not our second tight end is a better pass catcher or option than having a third receiver on the field. Right. So that's it's just in context, right? Amari Evans maybe being better than Dante Cephas is one thing, but either one of those guys being a better option than Tyler Warren is another, right? And one that I don't think that they have yet figured out.
Okay, so before I fumble another football here, Fitz, final thoughts heading into the Indiana week. Penn State coming back home in this game.
Yeah, just got to flush it. I mean, there's not much you can do with it. I mean, the season does come down to 2 games, and it's the harsh reality of college football these days in this realm. And they failed their first test, so like you got to put that one behind them. Nate has mentioned their record coming off losses. Indiana's not good. Like they just are not good. But you still are facing a Division I team this week, so you got to go out there and get past it. And it's going to be interesting to see how they turn on offense because, this is a defense that's not going to be able to take away everything like Ohio State's defense was able to. So, I mean, there's not much to it, but just to move forward.
And for people that want more answers, they want to demand more from head coach James Franklin, he will talk to the media tomorrow, and we will have that here, a live replay moments after it happens on the BWI Live channel. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, Sean Fitz, Nate Bauer here on the show. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We will be back on Wednesday with more breaking down Ohio State and what happened with the offense. And then at some point this week, we will shift our attention to Indiana, but there's going to be a lot more about Penn State's loss on Saturday coming up this week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Great time to sign up. We will talk to you later. Thank you for showing up today.